Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015 in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small American town. Following her parents' divorce, her father relocated to Texas while Athena remained with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite the distance, her father maintained regular contact, visiting her frequently, and her mother also made sure Athena spent quality time with him, given their amicable relationship. Later, both her parents remarried, and Athena gained two younger sisters, with whom she shared a strong bond, always seeking to spend as much time with them as possible. Athena was a cheerful child, always exuding positivity, with a passion for outdoor play and exploration. In late 2022, at the age of 7, she temporarily relocated to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays, after which she would return to her mother in Oklahoma. During her time in Texas, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's rural home, surrounded by woods and fields, provided the perfect setting for her to bond with her dad and his new wife, Elizabeth, in the beauty of nature. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school around 4:15 p.m., just like any other day. With her father and grandfather out hunting, she was left alone with Elizabeth. But that evening, Athena's mood was off, leading to an argument with Elizabeth. Upset, Athena retreated to her room, while Elizabeth headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. 20 minutes later, Elizabeth went to call Athena for dinner, but she was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth searched the entire house and yard, but there was no sign of the girl. She then called her husband's relatives who lived nearby, but they claimed they hadn't seen Athena. Elizabeth then called her husband, explaining the situation, and he immediately told her to contact the police and rushed home. At 6:40, Elizabeth dialed 911, and officers arrived within 14 minutes. She recounted the events and shared her theory that Athena might have run away due to their argument. However, the girl's relatives remained skeptical, given Athena's age of 7 and her history of never straying far from home, especially at night when she was afraid of the dark. Initially, the police viewed Elizabeth with skepticism, primarily due to the 40-minute delay in reporting her child missing after realizing she was gone. However, after listening to her detailed account of searching the entire house and contacting relatives, they concluded that she was likely telling the truth. The officers promptly launched a search of the surrounding area, undeterred by the darkness, and meticulously combed through the forests and fields within a several-kilometer radius of the house. They focused their search on the area around the house, thinking Athena might have wandered off and got lost in the darkness, based on their main theory. While they also looked into the possibility of her being abducted, they didn't find any evidence to support this, since there was no sign of forced entry. Elizabeth didn't report hearing any noises or screams, and the neighbors didn't see anything suspicious that evening. Athena's relatives and concerned townspeople assisted the police in their search efforts. As soon as Athena's mother heard about her daughter's disappearance, she rushed to the scene. The search continued until almost 5 a.m., but they failed to find any signs of Athena. The area around the house, especially during dark hours, was difficult to access, which complicated the search. At 7 a.m., the police resumed their search, this time with more officers. As news of Athena's disappearance spread throughout the county, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Some volunteers searched the area on horseback and ATVs, while the police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras. Despite their efforts, Athena remained missing by the end of the day. The police were increasingly concerned for her life, given the onset of winter and the 50 degrees Fahrenheit temperature in Texas, which would have been challenging for Athena, who was wearing light clothing. On the third day, the police broadened their search to a radius of miles around the house, suspecting a potential criminal element in Athena's disappearance. Despite initial doubts that she had wandered off, they grew more convinced that she hadn't left the house voluntarily. Over the next few days, They scoured the surrounding area in all directions, covering several miles, but found no trace of the girl, as it seemed unlikely she could have walked that far without encountering anyone. Investigators sought to identify those near Athena's house that evening, a challenge due to the secluded location. However, they soon got a break. A courier service had delivered a package that same evening. FedEx led them to the responsible organization and the specific van, which was equipped with cameras, providing key surveillance footage. After rewinding the footage to the time when the van arrived at the house, investigators uncovered disturbing evidence. The footage showed the driver, later identified as 31-year-old Tanner Horner, pulling a girl who looked like Athena into the vehicle. The police promptly apprehended Tanner at his address on suspicion of abduction and took him in for questioning. Tanner confessed to delivering a package to Athena's house that evening. He hit her with his van while backing up, but she was conscious and uninjured. Athena told him her name, and they conversed. Panicked, Tanner put her in his van, unsure what to do. When Athena said she'd tell her father, Tanner's anxiety grew, fearing legal consequences if she told adults about the accident. After that, Tanner's bizarre confession left the investigators perplexed. He claimed that, in his words, killing her seemed the only viable option. First, he attempted to break her neck, but it didn't work, so he resorted to strangling her. Then, he transported her body to a nearby river and discarded it in the water. The police were naturally skeptical of this account, but Tanner provided them with the exact location where he had left Athena's body. They immediately went to the site and indeed found her remains. The news of the young girl's brutal murder sent shockwaves throughout the country, leaving her relatives and thousands of others stunned. As the case garnered widespread media attention, the public was horrified by the sheer cruelty of the crime. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with abduction and murder. As detectives awaited the medical examiner's report, they delved deeper into the criminal's identity, seeking to understand his motives. Tanner's version of events seemed utterly far-fetched. He claimed to have lightly struck the girl with his van, causing no serious harm. Yet, he was allegedly so terrified that he immediately decided to kill her, fearing that hitting a child without causing harm might only lead to his job loss. His story appeared highly improbable. Tanner, engaged with a year-old child, worked as an Uber driver and musician, performing in Fort Worth cafes. His social media showed a normal life, with photos of his child and musical performances. With no prior legal issues, there was no indication he was capable of cruel violence. 2 months prior to Athena's tragic death, the delivery man had shared photos on social media, showcasing heartwarming moments spent with his son and grandparents. The wait for the medical examiner's report, which was anticipated to clarify the exact sequence of events, dragged on for several weeks. During this time, Athena's grief-stricken parents took legal action against FedEx and the contracting company, alleging that they had failed to implement adequate employee screening measures, hence allowing Horner to continue working and paving the way for such a heinous crime. A devastating twist in this tragic tale emerged. The package Horner had delivered on that fateful evening was, in fact, a Christmas gift for Athena, a Barbie doll she had long coveted, which her parents had ordered for her. As the medical examiner's findings were made public, even more questions surfaced in the case. According to the document, the victim's death occurred within an hour of her abduction, with her body showing injuries of varying severity. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Initially, detectives believed that the killer, Horner, had abducted the girl to sexually assault her after spotting her near the house. However, medical experts found no evidence to support this theory, which puzzled the police. The detectives didn't believe the killer's account of events, as it lacked a logical explanation. They speculated that the perpetrator's initial plan was to sexually assault the girl, but something went awry. One theory is that after arguing with her father's wife, the victim went outside and was in the yard when Horner arrived to deliver a package. Noticing the girl alone and isolated, he saw an opportunity to act on his depraved fantasies. Horner could have lured the girl into his van through deception or attacked her to put her in the vehicle without a struggle. What happened next is unclear, with two main theories emerging. It's possible that Horner had planned to abduct the girl and take her far away from the house to commit his intended crimes. However, she may have started screaming or tried to escape, fearing capture, which led him to kill her. Afterwards, he dumped her body in the river. According to an alternative scenario, Horner might have engaged in inappropriate behavior towards the victim without physically touching her. In this case, a medical examination would not have revealed any evidence of sexual assault. The detectives stumbled upon an unexpected clue suggesting a sexual motive behind the crime. What was unusual about Horner was that he had no prior criminal record, which is rare in most cases. Typically, people who are capable of murder start with less severe crimes. The detective spent weeks meticulously investigating Horner's past, speaking to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances to uncover any hints of potential involvement in other crimes. Eventually, they made a breakthrough. The police identified several individuals who alleged they were victimized by Horner during their childhood. To protect the investigation, the authorities did not release the victims' identities or disclose full details of the incidents. However, it is known that one of the victims accused Horner of assaulting her 9 years prior. Additionally, he was charged with 3 counts of sexual assault involving minors in 2013, although it is unclear whether these incidents involved one or multiple victims. One of Horner's victims had been publicly sharing her story for years, describing how he assaulted her when she was 16. She used social media to raise awareness about Horner's criminal nature, but despite this, he faced no consequences and was not considered a suspect. The victim stated that for years, nobody believed her allegations. However, after Horner killed Athena, these allegations gained significant attention, revealing Horner's true character and possible motives. Horner faces multiple trials, including Athena's murder. A disturbing TikTok video shows him watching a bug being killed with a spray, his face showing an unsettling pleasure. This hints at sadistic tendencies, making his account of Athena's murder even more suspicious. Horner claimed he killed Athena to avoid punishment for a lesser crime, but this excuse seems absurd given his sadistic nature. Authorities are seeking the death penalty, backed by video footage and Horner's own testimony. His guilt is clear, and additional evidence may be presented during the trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry was born on August 23, 1963, in the small American town of Rumford, Maine. She was the youngest of 10 children, and their parents had to provide for all of them, which was understandably a challenge. Crystal and her siblings grew up quite independently with strict parents, unable to watch over all the kids. Their older sister, who was just 12 when Crystal was born, took care of them like a mother, always looking out for her younger brothers and sisters. Growing up in a tense environment, they all wanted to start their own separate lives as soon as possible. Eventually, they scattered to different cities and states. Crystal was no exception. She wanted to start a family of her own and met a guy named Tom in high school. They soon got married and moved to California, but eventually, Crystal realized that big city life just wasn't for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine, settling in a small town called Bridgeton, about an hour away from her hometown. Crystal got a job at a local shoe shop, while Tom took on various odd jobs. Soon, Crystal discovered she was pregnant, and they welcomed their daughter Sarah. Despite the fact that Tom had initially wanted to be a father, their relationship with Crystal became complicated after their daughter's birth. He spent more and more time at a local bar, squandering almost all their money on alcohol. Once, he even took the money Crystal had set aside for groceries, as they didn't earn much. Tom's drinking habit sometimes left them with no money even for food. At some point, Crystal decided to file for divorce. Tom continued to see his daughter from time to time, but wasn't actively involved in her life. The situation escalated when Tom got a new girlfriend who started to harass Crystal. She called and threatened Crystal, show up at her place, and cause scenes, all because she simply didn't like that Crystal and Tom had once been married. Afraid to let Sarah visit her father, Crystal moved in with her mother. Over the years, she worked hard to save enough money to buy a house of her own. A few years later, she finally had the opportunity and purchased a small house on the outskirts of Bridgeton. The house was located just a few dozen yards from a picturesque lake surrounded by a forest. Crystal and Sarah were thrilled to have their own home just for the two of them. On May 10, 1994, when Crystal was 30 and Sarah was 12, they watched a solar eclipse together. The next day, as usual, Crystal went to work and Sarah to school. In the evening, they had dinner together, and Crystal tucked her daughter into bed. A few hours later, Sarah suddenly woke up to a loud scream. At first, she thought her mom was arguing with someone on the phone, but she quickly realized it was much more serious. Crystal was screaming at the top of her lungs, and Sarah immediately thought someone was attacking her mom. The door to her bedroom was slightly ajar, and through her fear, she came closer to it. Sarah realized that the screams were coming from the kitchen, but she couldn't see what was happening from where she stood. Sarah was gripped by fear and afraid to move or make any sound. After a few seconds, she heard footsteps and thought that whoever had attacked her mom was coming for her. She hid behind the bed, waiting for her door to swing open at any moment. Instead, she heard the kitchen drawer open, followed by a sound like someone was rummaging through the silverware. Crystal continued to scream and beg for mercy, and in the next few seconds, Sarah heard sounds as if someone had started stabbing her mom with a knife. With each new stab wound, her cries became increasingly muffled until they stopped completely. Despite being only 12, Sarah understood clearly that some unknown criminal was killing her mom. She wanted to rush to her mother's aid, but was paralyzed with fear. Sarah also realized that she had no chance against the knife-wielding person, and they would likely just kill her too. After her mother's screams stopped, Sarah couldn't move for several minutes. She waited for the criminal to come to her room, but the house was eerily silent. She finally left her room and went to the kitchen, where she encountered a disturbing scene. The lights were off, and the room was only illuminated by the moonlight through the window. As Sarah approached the kitchen, she glanced at the wall clock and saw that it was exactly 1 a.m. On the kitchen floor, she found her mother lying in a pool of blood that covered the entire floor. Despite being in a state of shock, Sarah recognized the urgency of getting help as soon as possible. Next to her mother's hand, she saw the telephone receiver. She picked it up and dialed 911, but there was complete silence on the line. Sarah then rushed to Crystal's room, where the second phone was, and tried to call the police again, but this number also did not work. She dialed the numbers several times, then realized she had only one option left: seeking assistance from the neighbors. Sarah rushed out into the street in just her pajamas, barefoot. It was May, and the temperature was quite low. It had also been raining that night. But she didn't think about anything except helping her mother. The closest house was around half a mile down the road towards the city center. She reached it and began knocking on the door, but no one answered. Sarah then ran to other houses, but again, no one opened the door. She kept running towards the city center, knocking on several more doors, but still no one responded. Eventually, she reached an Italian restaurant where the owners lived in the attached building. This time, they finally opened the door. Sarah told them that someone had attacked her mother, and the shocked residents led her inside. Sarah called 911 herself and reported what had happened. The officers immediately headed to their house. The first thing they noticed was the amount of blood. It was literally everywhere, on the floor, walls, and practically on every kitchen item. Crystal was dead, and the medical experts could tell at a glance that she had almost no chance of survival, even if she had received help immediately after the attack. Given the severe blood loss, it would have been impossible to save her. On the front door glass, the police found a palm print, but quickly realized it likely belonged to Sarah. No other fingerprints were found at the crime scene, but there were numerous shoe prints on the kitchen floor, stained with blood. Investigators took photos to try to determine the size and model of the shoes, thinking they had most likely belonged to the killer. The prints also led toward Sarah's bedroom, but for some reason, the perpetrator turned back and didn't enter the room. Detectives also noticed a strange detail. Apparently, the killer tried to wipe away some of the blood from the floor. Considering that almost the entire kitchen was covered in it, along with Crystal herself, this seemed odd. It was obvious he couldn't have wiped away all the blood. Then detectives noticed that some blood drops on the floor were in different shapes. Most of them looked as if they had landed at an angle. According to investigators, they had likely flown off the knife the perpetrator used to attack the victim, but there were also other drops that had fallen on the floor at a right angle and, judging by the splatters, from a greater height. Detectives speculated that apparently the perpetrator had injured themselves during the murder, and this blood belonged to them. Another confirmation of this theory was the fact that these drops led to a roll of paper towels, and there were none left on the way out of the house. Most likely, the killer used these towels to stop the bleeding and immediately left the crime scene. Medical experts found over 50 stab wounds on Crystal's body. The murder weapon was not found in the house, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator took it with them. Experts only confirmed that it must have been a kitchen knife. The killer struck with such force that a piece broke off and lodged into the victim's body. Crystal had also been sexually assaulted, and experts were able to extract a sample of the perpetrator's semen along with the blood drops. It was sent to the lab. However, there was a problem. Due to funding shortages, the local laboratory was quite overloaded, so results would take at least 6 months. As a result, detectives had to begin the investigation without any evidence. First, they ruled out robbery, since nothing was missing from the house. There were no signs of forced entry either, leading police to speculate that the victim had opened the door to the perpetrator herself. She was in her pajamas, suggesting she was unlikely expecting guests. Investigators theorized that she either knew the killer or someone unfamiliar knocked on the door and convinced her to let them in under some pretext. The detective decided to start with the only witness, Sarah. They went to the hospital where she was being held for health checks and began questioning her. The police asked why she ran to the neighbors instead of calling 911 from home. Sarah replied that both their phones weren't working. But this answer seemed strange to the investigators when they arrived at the crime scene and were able to make calls without any problems. The detectives assumed that in such a stressful situation, Sarah could have simply gotten confused. The receiver of the first phone was off the hook, and to make a call, it needed to be placed back. As for the second phone, they didn't rule out that Sarah might have dialed the wrong number in haste, or the phone line might have temporarily gone out due to the rain. Then the police started asking her if she saw the killer. Sarah responded that she had not left her bedroom until it was all over, but the police treated her story with a bit of skepticism. They asked how she could know that her mother was attacked with a knife. Sarah replied that it was obvious, but the detectives continued to press her. They felt that she might be withholding some information and that she had actually seen the perpetrator. In the first 3 days after the murder, the police interrogated Sarah 18 times, hoping that her story would change. But she continued to insist that everything had happened as she told them. While pursuing other leads, detectives stumbled upon their first breakthrough. They found a pair of boots at a local shoe store, whose sole patterns matched the bloody footprints on the floor. They also discovered that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, the girlfriend of her ex-husband. Despite the killer being obviously a man, the police decided to investigate her, considering that Teresa had repeatedly threatened the victim with murder. They could have found an accomplice and convinced him to commit the crime. However, detectives found no evidence to support this theory. Investigators then learned that at the time of her death, Crystal was seeing a man named Dennis. They had met 2 years prior when he started working in the shoe shop, and they began dating shortly after. Dennis eventually proposed to her, and although Crystal agreed, they never got married. Detectives found out that their relationship was quite tense. Crystal and Dennis argued a lot, and sometimes he displayed aggressive behavior, such as breaking things or hitting the wall. However, the police couldn't find any evidence that he had ever raised a hand on Crystal. The next day after the murder, they went to his house. When he opened the door, the investigators asked if he had left his house that night or seen Crystal. Dennis immediately asked if she was dead, and in the next second, he collapsed on the floor. After he regained consciousness, he began answering the detectives' questions. Dennis confirmed that he had planned to visit Crystal that evening, but got delayed after work, helping a friend fix a car. Upon returning home, he called Crystal, but she said it was too late, leading to an argument, and Dennis ended up staying home. While the police couldn't be 100% sure he was telling the truth, they were able to verify that he did help his friend that evening. Dennis also agreed to a polygraph test, and the operator didn't detect any signals of lying, except for one when he asked if he felt responsible for Crystal's death. Dennis answered no. Detectives also noticed that he had the same shoe size as the killer, but they found no matching footwear in Dennis's house. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, but made a strange request. He asked the detectives to come to his workplace through the back door to avoid disturbing others if they decided to arrest him. He explained that his boss had always treated him well, and he didn't want to disrupt the workflow. Considering that he continued to insist on his innocence, this request seemed suspicious. The police found out that Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town, had told them that just a few weeks before, Crystal had called her and said that she was scared of Dennis. Their arguments were becoming increasingly tense, and Dennis was growing more aggressive with each altercation. Crystal even thought about breaking up with him, but feared his reaction. During the conversation, she didn't provide any useful information, but as soon as the police left her workplace, Dennis came in and started asking what she had told the detectives. Despite their efforts, there was no evidence against the man, and the DNA test results would take months, so the police kept looking for other clues. They soon received a strange tip. A local man named Donnie got drunk at a party and started bragging about having killed Crystal. They took him in for questioning, but he claimed to have no memory of the party and denied any involvement in the murder. The investigators later discovered that Donnie was an alcoholic and a known liar. Another witness reported seeing a black pickup truck with New Hampshire plates near Crystal's house, but this lead didn't lead anywhere either. One woman told the police that on the night of the murder, she was driving past Sarah's house when she heard sirens and thought they were for her boyfriend, who lived down the road. At the same time, she saw a car with high beams on, following her at high speed. Thinking the driver was chasing her, she turned onto another road, but the car passed her by. However, the police couldn't confirm if this car was somehow related to the murder. Since then, the police struggled to find any solid leads. Crystal's relatives pulled together $10,000 as a reward for any information on the case, and they also distributed flyers around town, hoping to attract new witnesses. It's worth mentioning that Teresa, the girlfriend of Crystal's ex-husband, was seen tearing down these flyers multiple times. As for the ex-husband himself, he was thoroughly investigated, but detectives eventually doubted his involvement. Over the years, his alcohol problems became even worse, and now Tom drank heavily every day. In his condition, it seemed unlikely he could have committed such a crime, and he had no clear motive. The police also looked into 2 other men Crystal dated after divorcing her husband, but they found no evidence linking them to the case. All of them, including Tom, provided DNA samples, leaving detectives waiting for the lab results. 9 months after the murder, investigators finally received the results, which showed that the blood and semen samples didn't match any of the suspects, including Dennis. This left detectives with no other leads. They requested Dennis's sample again for additional testing, but the results remained the same. Stuck in a dead end, investigators decided to revisit their only witness, Sarah. They still assumed that either she was lying to them or her mind had blocked out the horrific memories of her mother's murder, and she actually saw the killer at that time. Sarah was living with her aunt in Texas, so the police headed to the other end of the country to question her. They polygraphed her, but the operator didn't detect any false answers. Despite this, investigators continued talking to her day after day, asking the same questions, but each time, she replied that she didn't see the killer. After that, the case remained unsolved for several years. The police kept interviewing people, checking various suspects, but it yielded no results. In the late 90s, when the FBI DNA database became available, investigators uploaded the sample of Crystal's killer, but no matches were found. In 1999, a new detective was assigned to the case. He decided not only to review all existing evidence, but also to collect DNA samples from as many men as possible living in the town and nearby areas. By then, the laboratory could conduct tests much faster, and the police obtained hundreds of samples, but none of them matched. The new detective also reached out to Sarah and persuaded her to work with a psychologist to try to recover suppressed memories. She agreed, but the psychologist concluded that Sarah truly didn't remember anything and was telling the truth about not seeing the perpetrator. Since then, the case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives kept working on it, but couldn't find any new leads. This continued until 2006, when something unexpected happened. Detectives received a message. A DNA sample was entered into the FBI database, and it matched with the blood and semen left by Crystal's killer. The owner of the DNA turned out to be a man named Michael Hutchinson, who had never been a suspect in the case. Detectives found out that in 2003, he was arrested for assault and threats with a weapon, resulting in a 6-month prison sentence and 3 years of probation. At the time, his DNA sample was taken, but for some reason it wasn't uploaded to the FBI database and remained stored in the lab. 3 years later, Michael was arrested for drunk driving with his children in the car. He was released on bail, but he didn't show up for his court hearing, so he was sent to prison. Michael was also arrested right at his own wedding and placed in a cell. His DNA sample was taken again, and this time, it was immediately uploaded to the database. Soon after, investigators in Crystal's case received a match. The detective called Sarah and informed her about this, but asked her to keep the information secret until the official charges were filed. He also asked if she knew this person, and Sarah said no. Considering that Michael was already behind bars, the detective began slowly building the case to ensure that the suspect had no chance of escaping punishment. He found out that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's house. Michael, who was 19 at the time, lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. He drove to his mother's house almost every day, which was just a little further away than Crystal's house, so Michael regularly passed by it. For the detective, it meant that he could have seen Crystal multiple times. Eventually, he went to see Michael in prison, but the man claimed to have no connection to the murder and said he never knew the victim. Considering that his DNA was found on her body and his blood was found at the crime scene, the detective didn't rush to believe him. While in prison, the detective noticed something interesting. Michael had a large scar on his palm, and as we recall, Crystal's killer likely cut his hand during the murder. Although in court this could not be considered strong evidence, the presence of DNA was more than sufficient, so Michael was finally charged with murder. According to the prosecution, the man, a known user of illegal substances, had repeatedly seen Crystal as he passed by her house on that fateful night. He decided to assault her, and considering that he refused to confess, it was difficult to speculate on how exactly everything happened. But with the available evidence, the outcome was clear. Michael assaulted and killed her. During the trial, an explanation was also found for the fact that the killer managed to not leave a single fingerprint at the crime scene. The answer was quite unexpected. Michael worked as a bricklayer, and over time, people who have been engaged in this job begin to wear away the patterns on their palms, making it physically impossible for them to leave fingerprints on various surfaces. In his defense, Michael told his version of events. He said he met Crystal at a bar and they went back to her place, where they had consensual intercourse. At some point, an unknown man in a black motorcycle jacket burst into the house, knocked Michael out, and killed Crystal. When he regained consciousness, Michael tried to fight off the attacker, but the assailant injured him in the hand and fled. Michael himself also decided to leave the crime scene without any reasonable explanation. His story obviously seemed highly doubtful. The only shoe prints on the floor also belonged to him. If his story was true, the intruder would have had to take off his shoes before breaking into the house, and it still wouldn't have explained the absence of any other marks on the floor. Furthermore, there wasn't a single witness who saw Crystal at that bar. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, and Michael was unanimously found guilty. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and remains in prison to this day. As for Sarah, her mother's murder undoubtedly had a critical impact on her. However, over the years, she found the strength to move forward. She attended college, became a writer, and published a book about her mother's murder, compiling all the available information. Moreover, when she was working on the book, Sarah managed to uncover new facts overlooked by the police. She discovered that during those years, Michael often borrowed his father's car, a black Ford pickup truck with New Hampshire license plates. As we recall, one witness reported seeing such a vehicle near Crystal's house. She also remembered the woman who told the police about the car with its high beams on, speeding past her on the night of the murder. At the time, the woman mentioned she mistook the ambulance sirens for police and thought they were heading to her boyfriend's house. That boyfriend was Michael. The police put his name in an address in the report, but back then, they decided there was no connection and didn't bother to investigate him further. Perhaps if the police had decided to speak with him, they would have noticed the cut on his hand, and the case would have been solved much sooner. Megan Newton, born in 2001 to Michael and Sarah, also had a stepsister named Demi. However, Megan primarily spent her time alongside her mother Sarah, forging an incredibly tight-knit bond akin to best friends. Megan kept no secrets from her mother, while Sarah, in return, would often consult her daughter, who displayed wisdom beyond her years on various significant issues. The woman characterized her daughter as highly ambitious, dynamic, and affable. Megan's friends described her as someone with an excellent sense of humor, compassionate, and thoughtful. Her grandparents remarked that she possessed a golden heart from a young age, always prepared to lend a hand to others. In her elementary school days, Megan encountered a new classmate, a girl whose family had recently relocated to England from China. The girl faced significant challenges in understanding the curriculum and interacting with peers due to her lack of English proficiency. Consequently, the teacher placed her beside Newton, hoping the compassionate and helpful Megan would assist the newcomer. Megan embraced this role wholeheartedly, overcoming the language barrier to aid her classmate and adjusting to a new environment. By the time the girl moved back to China, she had achieved a respectable level of English proficiency. Megan's kindness and open-mindedness persisted into her teenage years and adulthood, finding expression in her passion for sports. Soccer, in particular, captured her heart, leading her to join the Stoke-on-Trent women's soccer team. Additionally, she engaged in coaching, dedicating her weekends to training young girls under 7 years old instead of resting, striving for her Level 1 coaching badge. Megan aspired to secure a sports scholarship in the USA. Her commitment to sports, especially soccer, was so profound that she chose to pursue a career in it, even getting a small tattoo of a soccer cleat to express her love for the game. Upon completing her schooling, Megan embarked on her college journey, aiming to pursue her passion further. Megan Newton, a promising student aspiring to become a sports therapist or physiotherapist, was the first in her family to attend a tertiary education institution. Despite her potential for a bright future, her dreams were tragically cut short in the spring of 2019. Megan led a busy life, balancing 3 part-time jobs. On April 19th, a seemingly ordinary day, she finished work at a local fish and chip shop and headed home around 10:20 p.m. Living independently in her own apartment, Megan enjoyed her newfound autonomy. After getting ready, she joined friends for a night out at a club in Hanley, where they danced and had drinks. By Saturday morning, a grim discovery was made in her apartment: Megan's lifeless body, naked and covered in blood, a victim of a brutal stabbing. This horrific event deeply affected the community, who remembered Megan as a vibrant and charming young woman. The apartment paperwork and IDs conclusively identified the deceased as Megan Newton, a young woman who was brutally murdered in her bedroom. Megan's family was promptly notified by the police upon their arrival, and they had to face the heartbreaking task of identifying their daughter at the morgue. Megan, whom they had cared for with great love and recently allowed to live independently, met a tragic end that they never could have imagined, even in their worst nightmares. The crime scene was immediately secured, and forensic experts were sent to Megan's apartment to collect any potential evidence. The autopsy revealed the horrifying extent of the attack on Megan. She was strangled first, losing consciousness due to the lack of oxygen, and then she received 9 stab wounds to her back that punctured both her lungs. Furthermore, it was clear that she had been sexually assaulted. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Megan, was found nearby. The forensic pathologist concluded that it was these stab wounds that led to Megan Newton's untimely death. The bloodied knife and apartment keys were sent to the lab in the hope that DNA analysis could identify the assailant. It was believed that the culprit had accidentally dropped the keys while leaving Megan's apartment after the murder. The investigation began with detectives reconstructing the events leading up the tragic incident by talking to Megan's friends and family. It was determined that Megan had spent the evening at a club before taking a taxi home in the early hours of the morning. The investigative team reviewed surveillance footage from the area around the nightclub and the route Megan took to get home. Effort to trace her final movements and possibly pinpoint the assailant drew their attention to footage showing Megan boarding a taxi accompanied by a friend and an unidentified young man, raising questions about this individual's identity and potential role in the crime. Subsequent video from within Megan's apartment complex showed the same young man again, this time within the premises. Luckily, a camera positioned in the common hallway offered a clear view of the entrance to Megan's apartment, allowing officers to monitor who came and went that night. The goal was to identify the murderer by scrutinizing the video recordings from the evening of the incident. At approximately 3:44 a.m., Megan was seen entering her apartment building's lobby with the same young man she had shared a taxi ride with around an hour before. They proceeded together towards her apartment, with Megan appearing cheerful and exhibiting no signs of apprehension or unease around the individual. Upon reaching her door, Megan used her keys to unlock it, and they both went inside. However, a particular moment caught the detective's attention. While Megan was unlocking the door, the young man stood behind her, scanning the area and even making eye contact with the camera lens at one point. This behavior immediately raised suspicions among the police. They pondered whether the young man had premeditated harming Megan, possibly after coercing her into sexual acts, and was checking for potential witnesses. Further scrutiny of the video footage from the remainder of the night revealed a disturbing fact. Only the young man exited the apartment the following morning around 5:54 a.m. He attempted to leave the building but realized he needed a special key fob to do so. He returned to Megan's apartment, momentarily retrieved the keys, and eventually managed to exit the building. The external surveillance captured him discarding an object where the blood-stained apartment keys would later be discovered by a neighbor. The most damning evidence of his involvement in Megan's death was obtained from another surveillance camera, which showed him walking away from the scene, inspecting one of his hands that appeared to be covered in blood. This critical piece of evidence marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. Identifying the young man as Joseph Trevor was swift due to a recent run-in with the law just the day before the tragic event. He had been arrested for possessing ketamine, a substance used both medically and in veterinary settings as an anesthetic and sometimes for pain management. The police officer who had apprehended Trevor immediately recognized him in the surveillance footage. Trevor, 18, hailed from a reputable family deeply rooted in the law enforcement community, with both his father and mother serving as police officers. He resided in a neighboring district and had a long-standing acquaintance with Megan Newton, as they had been high school classmates. Joseph led a seemingly typical life. He was academically successful and shared Megan's passion for sports, excelling in soccer to the extent of playing professionally for Newcastle Town and securing a sports scholarship in America with plans to relocate there after completing his studies. Like Megan, Joseph was pursuing higher education in Newcastle, poised for a promising future. To many who knew him, Trevor was perceived as a kind, affable, and sociable individual. Yet he harbored a less visible, volatile side to his character, capable of shifting from a jovial and engaging demeanor to one that was reclusive, brusque, and abrupt without any discernible trigger. This unpredictability left acquaintances unsure of which version of Joseph they would encounter on any given day. When the detectives in the Megan Newton case began to look more closely at Trevor's background, they came across some very unpleasant information about his past. Approximately 3 years earlier, at age 15, he was suspected of abusing another teenage girl because the attempt at intimate contact failed. He was not charged or punished. However, everyone around the school knew about the incident. After this incident, classmates at the school began to call Trevor a predator and child molester since the public arrest at the school could not go unnoticed. Now, for the police, this information became a warning because Megan was also subjected to forced sexual intercourse that night. Joseph Trevor was identified as the primary suspect in the assault case. Investigators focused on his movements that night. They already knew from surveillance footage that he was near the nightclub and got into the same taxi as Megan, later heading to her apartment with her. Detectives were unsure what Joseph Trevor did before arriving at Newton's home. They discovered that Joseph attended a party with school friends the previous evening. Coincidentally, they ended up in the same bar as Newton. Since they knew each other from school, they greeted each other and continued to enjoy their time separately. However, Joseph didn't stay long at the nightclub. Security noticed he had a packet of white powder and called the police. The squad that arrived detained Joseph and took him to the nearby police department. Despite his parents being in law enforcement, Joseph faced no legal repercussions. The officers unlocked his cuffs, seized the ketamine, and let him go, advising him to return home and avoid further drug use. Ignoring their advice, Joseph returned to the club where Megan was. He was denied entry, and around 2:40 a.m., he met Megan by the taxi queue. He shared his recent ordeal at the police station and his concern about facing his parents. Megan, always compassionate, let Joseph borrow her phone to contact a friend, but he couldn't find a place to stay. Seeing his distress, Megan invited Joseph to stay on her living room sofa. In the morning, once sober, he could decide how to approach his parents. Trevor gratefully agreed to Megan's offer, which explains why surveillance footage showed him entering a cab with Megan and her companion. He messaged his dad, falsely claiming he'd spend the night at a friend's place. The cab first dropped off Megan's companion before taking Megan and Trevor to her apartment on Fletcher Road. Surveillance recorded them entering the building and later captured Trevor discarding stained keys in the yard. Authorities believe that during those few hours, Trevor violently assaulted Megan, leading to her death. The evidence was clear, leaving Trevor with no way to dispute the accusations. Law enforcement was ready to apprehend him and astonishingly, Trevor had already informed his parents about his role in Megan's death. After leaving the apartment just before dawn, Trevor went to a bridge over the A500 in Stoke-on-Trent. Sitting on the barrier with his legs hanging over, he seemed to be considering jumping. He perhaps sought an escape from the consequences of his deeds, contemplating suicide. Trevor had a history of depression and prior suicide attempts, and had been seen on this bridge before. A bystander noticed Trevor and promptly alerted the authorities. They arrived quickly and transported him to the hospital for a psychiatric assessment. After evaluation, medical professionals deemed it safe for him to be discharged, and he returned home under the watchful eye of his father. Joseph revealed the whole truth to his mother. He could no longer carry the weight of his actions and was wary of the inevitable consequences of his deeds. After gathering his thoughts, he approached his mother and confessed his involvement in Megan Newton's death with the simple statement, "I did something bad." He also shared these confessions with a few of his friends, possibly driven by or other emotions, to admit to actions that couldn't be undone. Once Joseph's mother heard his admission, she quickly contacted the authorities to report his confession. However, by that time, the investigative team had already identified Joseph Trevor as their prime suspect through surveillance footage and were coordinating his arrest. The young man was taken to the police station for questioning, where he acknowledged being at Megan's residence that night, but couldn't provide details about the brutal attack. His account was consistent with surveillance footage showing their entry into her apartment. She had kindly offered him the couch for the night. Trevor claimed that their physical interaction was consensual and that after their intimacy, he blacked out. He had no memory of the subsequent events and couldn't clarify the specifics of the incident or his motivations. The only memory he retained from that night was Megan's apology. At 15, Trevor had also faced allegations of harassing a peer. He was ridiculed by his classmates, who labeled him with various derogatory terms. Some branded him a predator and charmer, and among them, Newton allegedly tagged him as Rolf Harris. According to Trevor's account, Ralph Harris, a famed Australian TV host, musician, and painter, was convicted of child abuse and other sexual offenses. These monikers deeply wounded Joseph throughout his youth. He endeavored to erase these bitter memories. Over time, Megan's apology for the schoolyard taunts abruptly revived these painful recollections, propelling him into a fit of anger. In that instant, he purportedly seized a knife. Nonetheless, the detectives dismissed his account, skeptical of his conveniently lapsing memory at a pivotal juncture. The law enforcement officers were persuaded that he was fully cognizant of his actions throughout. It's likely that Megan merely turned him away that evening. She offered him a place to stay out of friendship, recognizing his troublesome situation. Having known each other for years, attending the same school and now the same college, they shared numerous interests and aspirations for the future. Their mutual enthusiasm for soccer might have led her to believe it was safe to share her space with him overnight. Upon returning to the apartment, Joseph attempted to escalate their interaction to a more intimate level. Megan was not receptive and declined. This deeply frustrated Trevor, especially under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Disregarding her objections, he chose to use force in an effort to eliminate the risk of her reporting the incident. He decided to take drastic measures to ensure her silence permanently. Shortly after Megan Newton's tragic passing, Joseph Trevor faced charges for intentionally ending the life of his fellow student, along with committing 2 acts of sexual violence. The assault was discovered to have occurred in a manner involving multiple attacks. He was apprehended at his residence, and after several months the legal proceedings commenced, despite his initial partial admission. Joseph first refused to admit guilt, but later he changed his story. He acknowledged causing Megan's death, though he insisted the relations that night were consensual. He maintained this stance until the trial commenced on February 17, 2020. At the start of trial, he suddenly shifted his plea to guilty on all counts. This move seemed aimed at avoiding a lengthy trial, perhaps expecting that the jury would quickly dismiss his defense. As a result, Joseph received a life imprisonment sentence with eligibility for parole after a minimum of 21 years and 65 days. A dramatic moment unfolded in court when Trevor, during sentencing's conclusion, turned towards Sarah, Megan's mother, and silently mouthed, "Sorry." This action deeply infuriated her. Apologies at this juncture were meaningless and could neither amend the past nor alleviate the prolonged suffering Megan's family endured while awaiting trial. His belated apology appeared as an additional insult to the grieving mother. No apology could bring back Sarah's daughter or negate Joseph's heinous actions that night. The indifference Trevor displayed in surveillance footage post-incident, showing him nonchalantly leaving Megan's residence, underscored his lack of remorse. The irreversible harm inflicted on Megan and her family robbed them of future joys and milestones, leaving them burdened with lifelong sorrow. Megan's closest friend, Ricardo Eccles, shared that they had plans to shop in Manchester the day after her passing. He was heartbroken upon learning of his friend's sudden loss and spent days in shock. However, in honor of Megan, he gathered himself and initiated a fundraising effort to assist with Newton family's funeral costs. His efforts successfully raised several thousand British pounds, which were handed over to Megan's mother. Megan had always been a pillar of support for those in distress. Now it was time for her supporters to reciprocate by providing emotional support and assistance to her family and all who cherished her brief yet impactful life. A fervent supporter of Stoke City Football Club, Megan was remembered by the team's players and passionate supporters who dedicated a minute of applause during a game in her honor. Her family and friends also collected funds to set up a commemorative bench in her memory at a serene park in Stoke-on-Trent. This bench overlooks a scenic pond and playground suitable for football, a tribute fitting for someone so interconnected with her community and beloved by all who knew her. In the Vicky Glass case, events unfolded unexpectedly. Vicky, a well-known figure in the city streets, became an enigma surrounded by unresolved questions. Her disappearance left behind numerous unsolved mysteries that concern everyone who has ever known her. Friday, September 24, 2021, marked the 21st anniversary of Vicky's tragic death. The police utilized this occasion to appeal to the public for new information. Following a thorough analysis of existing data, a new team led by Senior Supervisor Peter Carr will renew efforts into investigating her disappearance. Carr informed reporters that over the past year, extensive materials have been reviewed. They plan to interrogate all individuals potentially connected with this case and promised to employ innovative solutions. He emphasized that Vicky did not deserve such a fate, and her family deserves closure regarding what transpired. The police launched a website containing information about Vicky, details of her life and disappearance, as well as updates on the investigation's progress. In early November 2022, they received new surveillance footage showing Vicky on the day she disappeared. Carr addressed a press conference to discuss these new findings. The video depicted Vicky conversing with a man who sold washing machines. The police are appealing to the public for assistance in identifying this individual. Let us examine this mysterious figure named Vicky, whose life remains enshrouded in unanswered questions and secrets. On September 21, 1979, in Stockton-on-Tees, a small town nestled in the northeast of England on the banks of the rivers, Vicky was born. She had an older sister named Claire, who was just a year senior. Their parents, Deborah and Anthony, divorced when Vicky was only 6 years old. Following the separation, Deborah remarried to a man named Colin Goodall. With this marriage, Vicky gained an older half-sister named Cheryl and a younger brother called Thomas. Despite these additions to their family dynamic, they continued residing in Stockton. As a child, Vicky exhibited a profound interest in music. She admired Michael Jackson and had a particular fondness for the musical Cats. Between the ages of 13 and 18, she participated in a local jazz band and frequently performed alongside friends from that band, which brought her much joy. After completing her education at Blackstone High School, Vicky pursued further studies at an academy where she impressively earned 5 diplomas of higher education. However, and quite unexpectedly, her life took an entirely different path afterward. At 18 years old, an age characterized by both excitement and uncertainty, Vicky encountered significant problems after falling into bad company. Consequently, she became addicted to illegal substances, a situation that led her to work as a sex worker in order to finance this addiction. It is documented that she worked primarily in Cannon Park and Gresham areas of Middlesbrough near her hometown. In 1999, a challenging year for many reasons, Vicky found herself homeless and severely ill with pneumonia. During this difficult period, her friend introduced her to Patch Claus, who generously offered temporary shelter so she could recover properly. She stayed with him for several months, during which time he cared for her diligently, providing necessary medications as well as support services aimed at aiding recuperation efforts. Unfortunately, even such thoughtful assistance couldn't curb or change Vicky's ongoing addiction or alter what had become an increasingly destructive lifestyle up until that point. On Saturday, September 23, 2000, just a few days following her 21st birthday, Vicky and her friend departed from Patch Claus's residence around noon. Vicky was observed in the vicinity of Cannon Park in Gresham, where, according to some accounts, she was accompanying a client. Later that day, she met with another client on Set Road in Middlesbrough. Together, they proceeded to Main Road, an address recognized for activities involving illegal substances and escort services. After spending some time at this location, Vicky and her client exited the premises and hailed a taxi on the street close to Union Street. The taxi transported them to the man's home in Norton, approximately 3 miles away from their starting point. Vicky stayed briefly at this residence before calling another taxi to return to Middlesbrough. She consistently utilized the same taxi company's services. A white Vauxhall Vectra with registration number 790 arrived to pick her up at 4 a.m. on Sunday, September 24th. Vicky disembarked from the taxi around 4:20 a.m. at the intersection of Union Street and Ashwood Square, next to a pub known as Colleague. From there, it was only about a 5-minute walk to Patch Claus's house where she resided. However, she never reached home that night. The man who had been expecting her began worrying when she did not return and started contacting friends and visiting known hangouts, but without success. 3 days later, on September 27th, he contacted law enforcement authorities, which initiated an investigation into her disappearance. The subsequent week, on October 5th, the Northern Echo published an article headlined, "Disappearance of a Young Woman." In this piece, Vicky was described as being 5'3", tall with blonde hair tied back in a ponytail and speaking the local language fluently. She had been last seen wearing a white t-shirt paired with light gray trousers and white sneakers. The article also included comments from police officials noting that Vicky was known locally as a sex worker. The article reported that authorities and police were deeply concerned for her safety, but did not link Vicky's disappearance to the murder of another sex worker, Kelly Mason, who was found strangled in the same vicinity. Though Kelly and Vicky both engaged in the escort business and struggled with illegal substances, their cases were not connected. A man named Sean Thu received a life sentence for Kelly Mason's murder. However, he was not tied to Vicky's vanishing. In the early hours of November 2000, a local resident stumbled upon decomposing remains of a young woman on the outskirts of a village in Yorkshire, North England. These remains belonged to a 21-year-old woman who had gone missing 6 weeks prior from Middlesbrough, approximately 20 miles away. Subsequent years involved investigations into numerous brutal crimes. Vicky's family remained resolute in uncovering those responsible. In 2018, additional funds were allocated to assist police efforts in finding the perpetrator. On Friday, November 3rd at around 6 a.m., while walking his dog in Demi, a village situated about 20 miles southeast of Middlesbrough, a local resident discovered severely decomposed body parts of an unclothed female near a roadside ditch running through the village center. Police soon arrived at the scene and identified the victim as Vicky Glass, aged 21 and recently reported missing. The cause of death wasn't determined immediately. North Yorkshire and Cleveland police promptly initiated an investigation involving a team of 40 officers examining evidence through forensic examinations and documenting information regarding Vicky's last activities. Unfortunately, no clues surfaced at the site itself, nor were any articles of clothing found that she had been wearing last. Detective Brian Dan led this investigation effort and requested journalists reach out to anyone familiar with or having communicated with Vicky if they possessed helpful information. Given Demi's status as a well-known tourist destination, appeals specifically targeted visitors potentially present during relevant time span. Authorities urged residents to observe if any vehicles might have paused along roadsides before entering Demi, possibly linked to how Vicky was transported. On November 13, 2000, Vicky's mother, Deborah, addressed the media to urge witnesses to step forward with any information they might have. The following week, photographs of Vicky were displayed in the pub where she was last seen and in other city areas frequented by sex workers. By November 20th, police had questioned over 500 individuals and received 150 testimonies. Among these were former clients of Vicky and drivers from the Cannon Park overnight parking lot, a known spot for sex workers like her. A few days later, detectives expressed disappointment to local journalists regarding the public's limited response, especially after Deborah's heartfelt plea. On November 3rd, another police petition noted that numerous witnesses had come forward after investigators reviewed more than 70 hours of surveillance tape from Middlesbrough city center. It was reported that no substantial info had been received from these appeals. The police hadn't confirmed contact with all witnesses either. As Christmas approached, Tony Glass, Vicky's father, and Colin Goodale, her stepfather, visited the site where her body was found and placed flowers on her grave. They made another plea for residents to provide any useful information to help catch the culprit. Holding back tears, both men urged people not to hide what they knew and immediately contact authorities. Deborah was too distraught to attend the ceremony, but continued hoping for leads on her daughter's disappearance. Investigations extended into the next year. Police indicated that about a dozen sex workers potentially held crucial info regarding Vicky's case. In March of that same year, law enforcement intensified monitoring of truck drivers stopping at Cannon Park's parking area, subsequently arresting a 39-year-old man from Grimsby, who remained anonymous and released on bail. Efforts persisted as detectives examined transportation documents aiming to trace truckers present in Middlesbrough during the relevant weekend window. Detective Brian Dan disclosed they were able to analyze records from more than 100 companies while interviewing all identified former partners and clients of Vicky, information obtained via other sex workers' accounts. One prominent suspect emerged, a stocky male around age 34 to 38, possessing a mole on his left cheek with thick blonde or graying hair, reportedly involved in transporting household goods such as washing powder and washing machines. The investigation carried on through Sunday morning of September 24th, just past Vicky's disappearance date in September, leaving everyone determined, but still searching for concrete answers. Witnesses observed him exiting the truck. Additionally, on the evening of September 23rd, he gave $10 to Vicky, but kept her with her belongings as a guarantee that she would come back for them. On January 9, 2002, police apprehended a 47-year-old man suspected of being involved in Vicky's murder. The identity of this individual was initially withheld from the public. However, 2 days after his arrest, on January 11th, it was revealed that his name was Eric Coates. He resided in southern North Yorkshire, approximately 45 miles south of Middlesbrough. Despite these developments, Coates was released without any charges being filed against him. This marked the third occasion Mr. Coates had been interrogated concerning Vicky's disappearance. During an extensive search of his residence, where he lived with his parents, the authorities seized clothes, diaries, videotapes, and a car. All these items were subsequently confiscated by the police. Several properties in Scarborough, a coastal town about 50 miles southeast of Middlesbrough, belonging to Coates's father Raymond, were also subject to searches by law enforcement officials. Police reported that Mr. Coates could not provide an alibi for his whereabouts on the day Vicky vanished, though he claimed he likely remained at home since it was his father's birthday. Later on, Mr. Coates gave an interview to the Northern Echo newspaper where he suggested that Vicky died amid conflicts with illicit substance dealers and asserted that he had been wrongfully branded a liar because he couldn't remember details clearly. It emerged that Mr. Coates often availed himself of services provided by sex workers and had previously been a client of Vicky's too. In addition to denying involvement in her death due to any debts related to illegal substances, as rumored, he stated emphatically that such a violent end shouldn't befall anyone, and voiced hopefulness about justice eventually being served through finding the true perpetrators. In April 2002, the police informed Mr. Coates that they were not going to charge him in connection with Vicky's murder. The Northern Echo interviewed him, and he expressed a desire to return to normalcy. While police will refrain from publicly linking him to Vicky's case again, it is important to note his previous convictions. In 1994, Eric Coates was jailed for 15 months after being convicted by Teesside Court for kidnapping and assaulting a sex worker in Middlesbrough. Additionally, he was acquitted of attempted abuse and indecent assault on the same woman. In June 2006, Eric Coates received a 14-year prison sentence after pleading guilty to committing 15 intimate crimes against girls aged 11 to 14 and a single mother of 3 children. At the same time, Eric's father, Raymond Coates, then in his 70s, was charged with 12 counts of sexual harassment, but was deemed too sick to stand trial. Raymond has neither been officially acquitted nor convicted of any crimes up until now. This marked the second occasion on which Raymond had been excused from standing trial for serious charges involving one of his sons. In 2003, Philip Nigel Coates received a jail sentence of 13 years after being found guilty of 3 charges related to coercing a woman into an intimate relationship with his father, attempted brokerage, which is just baffling, and inciting her to commit severe intimate acts involving animals. Despite claims regarding his health conditions, Raymond Coates resided in North Yorkshire until he passed away in 2015. Information about his sons remains shielded from public scrutiny at present. Following Eric Coates' exoneration in July 2002 from all charges related to Vicky's case, Cleveland police announced their intention to question John Taylor, a man sentenced to life imprisonment for the kidnapping and murder of Leanne Tiernan in Leeds, West Yorkshire. The divorced father of 2 had kidnapped Tiernan while she shopped downtown on Christmas Eve in December 2000 and subsequently strangled her at his residence. Her body was discovered 9 months later by Inspector Jim Tate of Cleveland Police, who stated that they would closely monitor developments pertaining John Taylor, yet no further announcements linked him with Vicky's case subsequently emerged. In September 2002, Vicky's mother Deborah once again appealed to the media for information in connection with the 2nd anniversary of her daughter's death. During her speech, she said that she thought about taking her own life because of the unbearable pain she has to endure. The investigation into Vicky's case slowed down until the following year when a 2nd investigation began. Back in August 2003, the forensic expert who conducted the autopsy on Vicky's body stated he couldn't determine the cause of death. The main issue? Her body had decomposed significantly, and many parts were missing, including vital and several bones. It was established there were no signs of injuries, nor any indication that Vicky had been mistreated. Warren Michael Oakley issued an open verdict, with news agencies quoting him, "We don't know how she ended up where she was found, we don't know the cause of death, and we don't know if anyone was involved in her death." Later that year, Vicky's mother Deborah and stepfather Colin went to Demi, where her body was discovered, to lay flowers. Reporters from ITV channel joined them and filmed a brief 20-second video. In it, Deborah appeared visibly distressed as she mentioned how unjust it felt for Vicky to die this way and spoke about her daughter's declining happiness after encountering substance issues. Sadly, without major breakthroughs in the investigation, people began to forget about the case. In November 2004, though, Detective Brian Dan assured everyone that the investigation wasn't closing. Efforts would continue. Fast forward to December 2006, Cleveland police informed media outlets they intended to collaborate with Suffolk police regarding possible connections between Vicky's disappearance and the deaths of 5 sex workers near a town just south of Middlesbrough. Those victims were all discovered within 2 weeks, starting October 30th that year. 2 had been strangled, while causes for others remained undetermined. By December 21st came an arrest. Stephen Gerald James Wright was taken into custody on December 19th and charged with all 5 murders. Dubbed the Suffolk Strangler, Wright faced trial and in February 2008 received a life sentence without parole after being found guilty on all counts. In the days following the sentencing, various newspapers reported that Cleveland police would keep investigating Stephen Wright in connection with Vicky. This was despite the distance between the crime scenes and where Vicky was found. It's worth noting that Wright, a trucker, caught Cleveland police's interest since they had previously appealed to truck drivers and transportation companies many times. However, no further claims emerged linking Wright to Vicky's case. On September 24, 2010, marking the 10th anniversary of Vicky's death, her parents were scheduled to speak to reporters about their emotional turmoil from a decade-long search for justice. Her mother, Deborah, expressed that she thinks about Vicky daily and struggles with this loss. Tony, her father, revealed he lost his job and could no longer walk around alone or focus on anything. Gordon Lamp from Cleveland Police mentioned that despite 10 years passing without any significant discoveries, they remain committed to finding the criminal. Despite new requests for information, nothing new has come in. In December 2010, Vicky's case was linked to other crimes by Stephen Griffiths, known as the Crossbow Cannibal. Arrested on May 24, 2010 for murdering 3 sex workers in Bradford, capturing worldwide attention, Griffiths admitted his guilt and received life imprisonment without parole for these crimes. Reports indicated he consumed parts of his victims' bodies and disposed of other remains in garbage bags thrown into a lake. After pleading guilty in December 2010 and receiving life sentences for multiple murders before his arrest, as well as several additional offenses, police examined Griffiths' activities since age 14 to possibly connect him with other unsolved crimes. By January 2011, though, it became clear Griffiths didn't kill Vicky, according to police confirmation. As time went on, except annual appeals around each anniversary, the media started covering this case less frequently, regrettably, until sadly, when Deborah passed away at age 55, unsure how her daughter's life ended or who bore responsibility was. In 2017, the Cleveland Police, along with Crime Commissioner Barry Coppinger, sought a special grant from the Department of Home Affairs to fund investigations into 3 cold cases, including Vicky Glass's. These cases also involved 2 young women from Middlesbrough. One of them was 17-year-old Donna Mary Keogh, who went missing in May 1998. She had last been seen in Middlesbrough a month earlier. Even though no body was found, it is believed she was murdered. In 2015, Deputy Chief Constable Ian Spence of Cleveland Police apologized to Donna's family for shortcomings in the original investigation. However, only a year later, October 17, 2016, after an independent review of Donna's case, Cleveland Police began investigating her disappearance and suspected murder again. Despite a 20-year inquiry, no one has ever been charged with Donna Mary Keogh's murder. The third case for which Cleveland Police sought extra funding concerned the murder of Rachel Wilson in 2002 at age 19. She was last seen on May 31st of that year and, like Vicky Glass, had unfortunately resorted to sex work due to severe addiction issues. On June 27, 2012, parts of Rachel's body were discovered on a farm near Colby in Middlesbrough. By April 2018, Cleveland police had secured the requested grant funds, and Barry Coppinger remarked that he always thinks about families who are left without answers regarding their loved ones' deaths when dealing with such cases. The grant amounted to nearly £4 million and significantly aided these unsolved crime investigations. Assistant Chief Constable Jason Harwin mentioned that similarities exist among the victims' ages and where they disappeared from, but noted it was too early then to declare any definitive links between the cases. These crimes remain unsolved. Do you recall Vicki Glass's story? Her disappearance marked its beginning. However, why she was killed still poses questions today. Now there's a notable new suspect, Christopher Halliwell. This individual already has 2 murders attributed to him, Cyan O'Callaghan and Becky Godden Edwards being his known victims, and could be connected to Vicky's vanishing as well. It's like something out of horror flicks, but it's all too real. In October 2018, the North Yorks Enquirer news site featured an extensive article suggesting that another well-known convicted criminal might be linked to Vicky's disappearance. This individual is also considered a suspect in 2 other unsolved cases. The article was part of a broader series about the potential victims of Christopher Halliwell, a former taxi driver from Swindon responsible for 2 significant crimes. One of Halliwell's victims was Cyan O'Callaghan, a 22-year-old office worker. She went missing during a night out with friends in Swindon in March 2011. After bidding farewell to her friends, she got into a taxi and was subsequently killed by Halliwell. Police were led to Halliwell through surveillance camera footage. He was arrested shortly thereafter and eventually directed police to her burial site. Her body was found in a shallow grave in Oxfordshire. Following this discovery, Halliwell confessed to another murder committed 8 years earlier. He provided detectives with information on where they could locate the body of Becky Godden Edwards. Becky had last been seen alive getting into a taxi outside a nightclub in Swindon in January 2003. Halliwell later stabbed her multiple times and then strangled her. The North Yorks Enquirer news piece underscored concerns that Halliwell may be connected to additional unsolved disappearances beyond those already attributed to him. Such reports contribute valuable information, both direct evidence and investigative leads, for ongoing efforts aiming at resolving these troubling cases. In October 2012, Halliwell pleaded guilty to the murder of Cyan O'Callaghan and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25. However, since Halliwell wasn't allowed to speak with his lawyer before confessing to the murder, the judge found the case inadmissible. Consequently, all charges were dropped. New evidence came to light in 2001, indicating that Halliwell had been previously found guilty of Becky's murder. It is widely believed that Christopher Halliwell is responsible for numerous crimes. The article concludes that all 3 women from unsolved cases align with Halliwell's victim preference. Furthermore, both Rachel Wilson and Vicki Glass were sex workers, and Halliwell utilized their services. Perhaps because of this connection, he worked as a taxi driver in Middlesbrough's center. Halliwell traveled across the country, seeking work as a construction worker and taxi driver. He resided in various cities. His father presumably lived around York. Middlesbrough was about an hour's drive from York via the A19 highway. Halliwell had a keen interest in fishing and traveled extensively for it. The River Tees offers numerous excellent fishing spots, including the Staunch, near where Vicki Glass's body was discovered. Fishing would provide an appropriate excuse for him to frequent the area and commit crimes. There is no information online suggesting that police have officially linked Halliwell to Vicki's case. In 2021, Cleveland police closed one of 3 unsolved cases after a 62-year-old man confessed to Rachel Wilson's manslaughter. Kate Hall introduced Rachel to illegal substances shortly after they met when she was 15 years old and then coerced her into escort work to finance their addiction together. He had been under police investigation for several years and had carried a lock of Rachel's hair in his wallet throughout that time. Ultimately, he received an 18-and-a-half-year prison sentence. Presently, Vicky's death remains unexplained, a source of unbearable pain for her family and friends, who continue searching tirelessly for answers, though they remain elusive thus far. Her loved ones are deeply distressed by what befell their dear Vicky. We can only hope that one day they will find peace and truth shall finally prevail. In a world where the boundaries between love and horror, between compassion and betrayal, become increasingly blurred, we are confronted with a story that captures global attention. This is the tale of Jenna Oakley, a young woman whose life has descended into a haunting nightmare, entwined with passions, revenge, and sinister secrets. Through the eyes of those who have grappled with the dichotomy of good and evil, faith and betrayal, we delve into a narrative that prompts contemplation about the very essence of the human soul and the values that guide our decisions. Despite efforts by Jenna's legal team to argue for her confinement in a juvenile facility, Judge Darren Peckler decreed that she should face the consequences of her actions in an adult prison. As the verdict was delivered, the judge condemned the cruelty and senselessness of the crime against Rhonda, Jenna's stepmother. While Jenna was convicted, her father, Philip Oakley, remained plagued by questions about his daughter's motivations. Dissatisfied with the sentencing, Philip believed Jenna deserved a harsher punishment, lamenting the fact that she would only serve 15 years, while he, her brother, and Rhonda's children would endure a lifetime of pain and loss. But who is Jenna Oakley, and what drove an ordinary girl to commit such a heinous act, becoming enmeshed in a tale of tragedy? Let us delve into the depths of her soul together, seeking to unravel the motives behind her actions and grasp the true essence of this enigmatic personality. Jenna's upbringing was marked by hardship and neglect. Left alone at home from a young age, her mother's inability to provide a stable life left Jenna and her brother David vulnerable. The departure of her older stepsister, who had served as their guardian, further compounded their struggles. The neglect they endured was so severe that intervention by Child Protective Services became necessary, ultimately leading to their removal from their mother's care. In April of 2016, Jenna and David made the pivotal decision to move in with their father and his wife, Rhonda, a woman of 52 years at the time. Rhonda, from the outset, embraced her role as a stepmother wholeheartedly, treating her husband's children as her own. Those close to Rhonda and her husband later recounted how she had longed to be a nurturing presence in her stepchildren's lives, welcoming them into her home with warmth and sincerity. Little did anyone suspect that this seemingly ordinary transition would culminate in a harrowing tragedy. Despite Jenna's academic achievements and the praise she received from her teachers, she grappled with inner turmoil. Her rebellious nature made it challenging for her to adhere to the rules imposed in her new household. However, the situation escalated further when Jenna's parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, a connection that had roots dating back to Jenna's childhood in Indiana. As Jenna navigated the complexities of her adolescence, one enigmatic figure loomed large in her life: Rhonda, her stepmother. While ostensibly a pillar of support and protection, Rhonda's influence on Jenna's life would ultimately be shrouded in darkness. Delving into Rhonda's story becomes essential to unraveling the mysteries of her personality and understanding the profound impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Rains Oakley, born on March 5, 1964, in Kent, USA, Casey County, emerged into the world as the daughter of Howard Lee Rains and Mabel Walls Rains. Her journey through life saw her graduate from Casey County High School in 1982, embarking on a 3-decade-long career in a renowned company specializing in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Described by her peers as a beacon of kindness and joy, Rhonda's warmth endeared her to many. Prior to her encounter with Philip Oakley, Rhonda had traversed the trials of divorce and motherhood, already a mother of 4 from a previous marriage. Fate intervened when Rhonda and Philip crossed paths on the golf course, igniting a whirlwind romance that led them to tie the knot. Despite their shared affection, the stark age difference between Rhonda and Philip raised eyebrows, prompting familial objections. Concerned about Jenna's involvement with Kenneth, who was 5 years her senior, Philip and Rhonda embarked on a mission to quell their daughter's infatuation. Rules were imposed, including the confiscation of Jenna's electronic devices and stern demands for compliance. However, Jenna's defiance only intensified, her clandestine rendezvous with Kenneth fueling a growing animosity towards her parents. On the fateful afternoon of September 1, 2016, as the golden hues of dusk began to descend, a grim discovery unfolded within the Oakley household. David, Jenna's younger brother, returned home from school, unaware of the tragedy that awaited him. As he stepped through the threshold and into the familiar confines of their home, an eerie silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the distant barking of their family pets echoing from the basement below. Curiosity mingled with apprehension. David ventured into the basement, where the source of the canine distress awaited. What he encountered in that dimly lit space would haunt him forever. There, sprawled upon the cold concrete floor, lay Rhonda, his stepmother, her form unnaturally still, an aura of foreboding enveloping her motionless figure. Shock and panic gripped David's heart as he rushed outside, his frantic footsteps echoing through the quiet suburban streets. With trembling hands, he sought aid from their neighbors, his voice a desperate plea for help in the face of unspeakable horror. Emergency services descended upon the scene, their presence a beacon of hope in the darkness that had descended upon the Oakley household. Yet, despite their valiant efforts, Rhonda's fate had been sealed in bloodshed. The grim reality of her demise painted a chilling picture of brutality, her life extinguished by the cruel hand of violence. As investigators delved into the heart of the matter, the sinister truth began to unfurl like a macabre tapestry. What initially appeared as a botched robbery soon revealed itself to be a tangled web of deceit and betrayal. Amidst the chaos of the crime scene, the absence of Rhonda's car and the ominous discovery of a discarded cleaver hinted at a calculated act of malice, orchestrated with chilling precision. Upon Philip's return home, he was immediately met with the piercing scrutiny of detectives, their questions probing the depths of his shattered reality. With a heavy heart, he recounted the events of that fateful day. Each word a painful reminder of the chaos that had unfolded within the sanctity of their home. As he spoke, a gnawing sense of dread gripped him, tendrils of uncertainty weaving their way into his consciousness. The realization that his daughter, Jenna, had been conspicuously absent from the fabric of their lives on that tragic day only served to deepen the shadow of suspicion that loomed over their fractured existence. In the midst of his interrogation, Philip found himself grappling with the weight of unanswered questions, each more ominous than the last. Did Jenna's inexplicable absence herald a darker truth, a sinister plot veiled beneath layers of deceit? The very thought sent shivers down his spine, a stark reminder of the fragility of their fractured reality. With a heavy heart and trembling voice, Philip disclosed the tumultuous relationship between Jenna and Kenneth, a young man whose presence had cast a pall over their once tranquil home. He recounted his desperate attempts to intervene, to shield his daughter from the perils of forbidden love, each plea falling upon deaf ears. Yet, even amidst the chaos of his shattered existence, Philip clung to the fragile hope that his daughter's innocence remained untainted, that beneath the veneer of suspicion lay a truth yet to be revealed. And so, with bated breath and weary resolve, he entrusted the weight of his fears to the vigilant gaze of law enforcement, their pursuit of justice a beacon of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Evidence pieced together by investigators revealed a chilling sequence of events leading up to the tragic incident. At 3 a.m. on August 31st, the day preceding the harrowing event, Kenneth embarked on a journey from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, his destination set firmly on the Oakley residence. Surveillance footage from a Denver store manager corroborated this, capturing Jenna and Kenneth's presence on September 1st. The footage depicted them entering the establishment and subsequently departing, seemingly in the direction of a vehicle resembling Rhonda's stolen car. Jenna's demeanor in the footage was unsettlingly composed, devoid of any outward signs of duress. This revelation prompted investigators to pivot their focus away from the notion of a forcible abduction, instead entertaining the unsettling possibility of Jenna's direct involvement in her stepmother's demise. Subsequent searches of Jenna's personal effects unearthed a chilling narrative within the pages of her diary, a narrative dripping with venomous hatred and a chilling resolve. In its pages, Jenna's innermost thoughts and desires were laid bare, revealing a festering resentment toward her family and a steadfast devotion to Kenneth, despite her earlier assurances of compliance with her parents' wishes. With meticulous detail, Jenna outlined her sinister plan to obliterate her family unit, driven by an obsessive desire to preserve her forbidden love at any cost. Her father was slated as the first victim, the designated hour of his demise meticulously plotted between 4 and 5 a.m. Armed with a knife, Jenna intended to lure him to the basement before delivering the fatal blow. Rhonda, her stepmother, was next in line, her fate sealed within the confines of Jenna's twisted imagination. Between 6 and 8 a.m., Jenna planned to invade Rhonda's sanctuary, silencing her forever with the same instrument of death wielded against her father. David, Jenna's unsuspecting brother, occupied the final slot in her macabre symphony of destruction. In the somber confines of his own room, he would meet his untimely end, victim to the machinations of a sister consumed by darkness. As Philip grappled with the horrifying reality laid bare in Jenna's diary, the weight of his daughter's malevolence bore down upon him, shattering the fragile facade of familial harmony beyond repair. In Jenna's meticulously orchestrated plan, he found himself confronted with the unthinkable. The knowledge that his daughter was capable of unspeakable atrocities, her innocence forever lost to the abyss of her own twisted desires. At the onset of the investigation, a damning piece of evidence emerged, thrusting Jenna into the unforgiving glare of suspicion. Philip wasted no time in providing the authorities with Kenneth's contact details, a crucial step in the relentless pursuit of justice. With unwavering determination, law enforcement agencies swiftly tracked the fugitives to their hideout, culminating in a dramatic showdown on September 4th, just 3 days after the heinous crime had been perpetrated. In the quiet streets of Tucumcari, New Mexico, authorities closed in on their quarry, discovering Rhonda's stolen car parked ominously near the hotel where Jenna and Kenneth sought refuge. With precision and resolve, officers apprehended the pair, swiftly escorting them to separate vehicles, bound for a detention facility in New Mexico pending extradition. As the investigation intensified, authorities scoured the confines of the vehicle in search of the weapon wielded in Rhonda's brutal attack. Yet their efforts yielded nothing but frustration. Meanwhile, Kenneth, in a desperate bid to shield Jenna from the full weight of culpability, penned a chilling missive before attempting to end his own life. The ghastly tableau of his self-inflicted demise sent shockwaves through the detention center, leaving Kenneth teetering on the precipice of mortality. In the wake of this harrowing revelation, authorities made the conscious decision to shield Jenna from the grim reality unfolding within the confines of her co-conspirator's cell. With painstaking care, they orchestrated her return to Kentucky, their intent clear: to spare her the burden of knowledge until such time as she could offer her own testimony. For Jenna, shrouded in the pall of uncertainty, the journey back to her home state would be fraught with trepidation, each passing mile a reminder of the tumultuous path that lay ahead. Jenna's admission to the authorities laid bare the chilling reality of her involvement in the crime, as she recounted the grim sequence of events with a heavy heart. In her confession, she unraveled the haunting narrative of the fateful night, painting a picture of tragic inevitability. According to Jenna's harrowing testimony, the eve of the crime bore witness to Kenneth's clandestine visit to her home, a clandestine rendezvous that would shroud the dawn in darkness and alter the course of countless lives. As the day unfolded, their illicit tryst unfolded against the backdrop of unsuspecting bliss, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. The tranquility of the day was shattered when Rhonda returned home, unwittingly stumbling upon the clandestine affair brewing in the shadows of her own abode. A confrontation ensued, escalating from heated words to the chilling embrace of violence. In a moment of unfathomable rage, Jenna's hands found purchase around Rhonda's throat, a desperate bid for control that would prove futile in the face of her lover's intervention. With a sickening inevitability, Kenneth stepped forward, a dark harbinger of finality as he seized Rhonda in a grip that defied mercy. The room bore witness to the cruel symphony of violence, the echoes of struggle drowned out by the cold steel of a kitchen blade. In the deafening silence that followed, Rhonda lay motionless, her life extinguished by the callous hands of her own kin. In the aftermath of the heinous act, Kenneth's fragile resolve faltered, his stomach lurching in revulsion at the sight of his own depravity. Vomiting into the void, he grappled with the weight of their transgression, a grim testament to the depths of human depravity. When pressed by authorities regarding the whereabouts of the murder weapon, Jenna's response offered little solace, her words a chilling testament to the calculated nature of their flight. With steely resolve, she recounted their hasty disposal of the incriminating evidence, a macabre ritual enacted in the shadow of their impending doom. As Jenna recounted her tale, her lover lingered on the precipice of life and death, his mortal coil tethered to the fleeting tendrils of existence. Yet, fate would not afford him the opportunity to atone for his sins, for the specter of mortality loomed large over his hospital bed. In the cold embrace of October's twilight, Kenneth breathed his last, leaving behind a legacy marred by tragedy and unfulfilled promise. Following the formalities of the court, Jenna found herself facing the weight of justice, her fate entwined with the tendrils of guilt and accusation. The charges levied against her bore testament to the severity of her transgressions, branding her as the architect of her stepmother's demise and a perpetrator of theft. Held without reprieve in the confines of a juvenile detention center, Jenna awaited her trial with a heavy heart, her thoughts haunted by the specter of her own culpability. As the gravity of her situation sank in, her father, once a pillar of familial devotion, turned his back on her, his words a damning indictment of her actions. Gone was the paternal instinct to protect, replaced instead by a grim resolve to see justice served. The news of Kenneth's demise, a grim epilogue to their shared tragedy, was withheld from Jenna until the day of her court hearing. The revelation struck her with the force of a sledgehammer, her world crumbling around her as she grappled with the enormity of her loss. In the hallowed halls of justice, her anguished cries reverberated, a stark reminder of the human cost of her actions. In a bid for clemency, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, her admission a frail echo of remorse in the face of overwhelming guilt. Yet, even as she sought redemption, her father's disillusionment loomed large, his cries for systemic reform falling on deaf ears. For Philip, the scars of his family's tragedy ran deep, a testament to the failings of a system ill-equipped to protect its most vulnerable. As the sentencing hearing drew near, Susan Hooper, a beacon of hope amidst the storm of legal proceedings, sought to unravel the tangled web of Jenna's tumultuous upbringing. In her impassioned plea for leniency, she painted a portrait of a girl besieged by a lifetime of abuse and neglect, a victim of circumstance driven to desperate measures by forces beyond her control. As the gavel fell and Jenna's fate was sealed, the echoes of her turbulent past reverberated through the hallowed halls of justice, a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human spirit in the face of insurmountable odds. Despite Jenna's pristine record devoid of any criminal blemish, the perplexing nature of her drastic actions left many scratching their heads in bewilderment. How could a girl so esteemed by her educators and peers stoop to such depths of desperation without a discernible cause? The absence of her family during the trial only added fuel to the fire of speculation, with Philip's refusal to participate and Jenna's mother's conspicuous absence casting a shadow of doubt over their parental obligations. Delving deeper into Jenna's tumultuous past, Susan unearthed a trail of abandonment and neglect that painted a stark picture of maternal indifference. Drawing from a trove of evidence and records, she pieced together the fractured narrative of Jenna's early years, revealing a childhood marred by the absence of maternal guidance and care. Susan's exhaustive investigation traversed state lines, scouring through the annals of child welfare services and medical archives in Indiana and Kentucky alike. Her efforts culminated in a tapestry of testimonies woven together from the threads of Jenna's past acquaintances and confidants. Among them stood Jenna's older half-sister, a reluctant witness whose recollections shed light on the harrowing reality of their shared upbringing. Recounting years of instability and insecurity, she laid bare the truth of their fractured family dynamic, where safety and solace were but distant dreams. As Susan peeled back the layers of Jenna's past, a chilling portrait emerged of a home haunted by the specter of crime and betrayal. Jenna's tender years were marked by the malevolent presence of her mother's ill-fated romance, a dalliance with an ex-convict that plunged their household into a maelstrom of chaos and fear. From the tender age of 3, Jenna bore witness to a procession of theft and infidelity, her innocence shattered by the tumult of her mother's misguided affections. All of these events unfolded before Jenna and her younger brother. It started with a concerned neighbor's call to Child Protective Services upon discovering rats in Jenna's family home. Beyond the rodent issue, the neighbor expressed worry about the children being left unattended for extended periods. Records from social workers' visits painted a grim picture of Jenna's home life. Jenna's mother's hostility toward social workers hindered their access, but when they finally entered, they were met with appalling conditions. Rotten food, piles of garbage, and rat droppings littered the house. Children were found relieving themselves on the floor amidst the squalor. The kitchen was a breeding ground for mold, with unwashed dishes stacked for months. Insects and rodents roamed freely, posing serious health hazards. Compounding the danger, children had unrestricted access to medicines and other harmful substances. Despite efforts to improve the situation by relocating Jenna and her brother to live with their father in Kentucky, conditions did not ameliorate.